movement with the Prothonotary's office? I know that was another one that was being discussed.
Well, it's still being discussed, but in that context, that's actually something that's coming out of the Administrative Office of the Pennsylvania Courts. So there's no legislation tied to it yet. What happened was, there are a number of things actually going on. Back in the late 1980s, we won a court decision that said a system that relies on each county funding the courts independently means you have an unequal system of justice, and the only way to correct that constitutionally is for the state to take over funding and administration of the lower courts. Now, you may have noticed from your budget this year, you're still paying for the lower courts. And because as soon as the court issued that opinion, the legislature said, well, isn't there a separation of powers issue here? And, you know, basically saying, are you going to make me? And so they've kind of danced around the issue since then. We actually got a mandamus in we filed in 94, the court approved it in 97. The court did a study of how a takeover might be accomplished. The legislature took the first step of what the court recommended and did do that. So your court administrator and deputy administrators are state employees because of that legislation. But that begged the question of all the remaining core court employees, plus how do you deal with the row offices and all the rest. So we filed another suit in late 2008, I think it was. And yeah, it was 2008. And we had to figure out what to call it, because what do you call a suit to get the Supreme Court to enforce its own order? Okay. So anyhow, that's the litigation we filed. 1 year later, the court actually held a hearing on it, and that goes back to 2009. They've still not issued a decision as a result of that hearing. In the meantime, the court itself, for different reasons, had contracted with a firm to do a study of what would be involved with them taking over the Prothonotaries and clerks. And it really is a different reason. And if you look at the row offices, those are the two offices most closely aligned with the core court functions. And the study made recommendations at different levels. One, if you just took the row office. Second, and essentially they would no longer be elected, they would be a state employee. Second, if you took the row office and chief deputies, the way we did with the administrators. And third, if you took the entirety of their offices. And then made recommendations to the court of, as I say, costs, the mechanics, the statutory underpinnings, and all the rest. The court still has not determined what they want to do. We believe they are leaning toward the row office and deputies, and to pay for it, they would probably take no more than 5% of what those two offices collect, which they think would be sufficient to move them over into state employment. There's a few other moving parts involved. You know, how do you handle accrued pension, sick leave, vested pension, accrued sick leave, accrued vacation time, and those kinds of things. But that's more on the detail end of the spectrum. They had planned to pull the trigger a couple times, but then have had other intervening issues. The most recent of which was destroying the legislature's reapportionment scheme. And so they aren't anxious to aggravate either the governor or the General Assembly at this point, so that's why it's been delayed a bit. Now that the governor's proposed budget is out, we think the way is cleared. We might see something from the AOPC in the way of a proposal to the governor sometime late spring or into the summer. The governor, by the way, in the budget flat funded the courts, so no increase, no decrease, that 0% change in all of their line items compared to 11-12.
Wow.